Good morning, everybody. We're going to kick off, but there'll be a lot more time for networking and catching up with your friends as we start the breakfast in about 15 minutes or so. But good morning, and welcome to the 5th Annual Hunger and Health Panel Discussion presented by Gleaners Food Bank of Indiana and the Indianapolis Business Journal. I'm Nate Feltman, CEO and publisher of the Ibj. We're thrilled to have you all back in person this year after hosting this event virtually last year. So we really appreciate you being here and the camaraderie we're going to share this morning. I want to thank the Gleaners President and CEO, John Elliott, and the entire Gleaners organization for their ongoing partnership with the Ibj. It's really a privilege to work with you all in the fight against hunger, especially this year as the need has only grown, as you all know, in the wake of the pandemic. Your team, John, along with the Indiana National Guard and the entire Indianapolis community, have stepped up to put food on the table for tens of thousands of families in need during these challenging times. So thank you once again to the entire team. I know many of you here today understand just how important our work is and how many Hoosiers count on Gleaners and each of us to sustain them. Thank you for joining Gleaners and the Ibj in the fight against hunger, and thank you for your compassion, your commitment, and for all you do to help our fellow Hoosiers. Now it's my distinct pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, and that is John Elliott, President and CEO of Gleaners, one of the largest, as you know, one of the largest food banks in America, distributing more than 68 million meals per year to approximately 300,000 hungry Hoosiers across 21 counties in central and southeastern Indiana. With nearly 100 employees now and more than 17,000 volunteers donating almost 100,000 hours per year, Gleaners supports over 300 local food pantries, schools, soup kitchens, and community centers. While John's career has taken him around the world, John's roots and heart, as you know, are here in Indiana. He has deep passion for community service and has served on more than 25 community boards and committees. John, thank you once again for your continued partnership and all that you and your entire Gleaners team do to fight against hunger throughout the state of Indiana. John?
Well, thank you, Nate, and Ibj has been a phenomenal partner, and as I look out across the room, I could attach that label phenomenal partner to so many of you. I see pantry partners, I see fellow Indy Hunger Network members here in the room, corporate partners who've grown into complex, multifaceted relationships with us. So it's very rewarding that you're here this morning, particularly in a context where, frankly, it's harder to fill a room. Maybe easier to fill your screen with lots of tiny snapshots of people. So thank you. I'm going to do a couple of things. I want to give you some recent history context, but I also want to take more time to pivot to where we aspire to go together with all of you in the future. So as Gleaners Food Bank of Indiana emerges from the pandemic, and we do see that light at the end of the tunnel, leading the fight against hunger, this hunger relief organization accepts disproportionate responsibility to be an entrepreneurial innovator. We'll demonstrate the best of corporate supply chain efficiency and be a compassionate nonprofit compelled to close a daunting, persistent meal gap for the first time in Indiana history. This must be done in a way that adheres to and achieves every key deliverable in Gleaners' ambitious strategic plan, but also redefining the way nonprofits of scale, for-profit companies, charitable foundations, state and local government, and higher ed collaborate to solve persistent social challenges in sustainable ways. We must resolve root causes of food security. I was asked about root causes just a little while ago. Chronic health conditions, social determinants of health, and the interconnected challenges of poverty simultaneously, because that's the way our neighbors deal with those challenges. This morning, we're announcing the next phase of our ambition to create an innovative agri-hub solutions center that benefits our region, our state, and the entire Feeding America national network. Every success within our Fresh Connect Central Regional Co-op benefits Gleaners' 21 county service area disproportionately. Extra produce stays close at hand disproportionately, and so on. Going beyond simply sourcing and distributing nutritious foods, We see Gleaners and Fresh Connect and the new operating subsidiaries that you'll hear about becoming an entrepreneurial incubator that tests and then refines ideas with potential for greater impact and scalability. The ultimate goal through testing these ideas is to increase the volume of nutritious products that are distributed to food-insecure households, lowering costs, and increasing nutritional quality and variety. During the test phase for each idea, the AgriHub Solutions Center would focus on understanding and evaluating supply chain opportunities, sustainable pricing, and highly efficient distribution. As ideas are tested and programs begin to take shape, the AgriHub would be committed to developing and sharing best practices and serving as a training center for other food banks, for local partners, even the Feeding America Network. We also intend to establish Gleaners and the co-located AgriHub as a sustainability leader within the Feeding America Network, in parallel with food retail partners who frankly know how to do it better already. We propose establishing a physical hub adjacent to Gleaners' main warehouse on the west side of Indianapolis, where we sit in the middle of 2,000 distribution centers who have expertise to share, a wealth of expertise. We envision this being a shared work site for partner organizations and frankly a showcase to show what works. Our board has already authorized a campus master planning process to vet ideas related to this AgriHub, and we've begun working with a firm that specializes in design thinking methodologies. We formed a food strategy committee, pulling in talent from the board, senior staff, and frankly more than half of that committee is outside subject matter experts bringing their talents to bear. So let me take a little moment for more detail. We would need to purchase additional land, add a second building. That building would house the AgriHub, where hunger relief and larger food sourcing, processing, distribution challenges are resolved. Activity would not be limited to Gleaners' own hunger relief programming. It'd be a place where talents from nonprofit, for-profit, higher ed, government, charitable foundations all come together in a unique way and incorporate aspects, but go beyond what you might find in a business startup incubator. A campus master plan would include Gleaners building and new building. We're not assuming new activity happens in new building or old activity happens in old building, and it is an old building. But flow of food, workflow planning, assigned to the ideal locations for maximum efficiency in operations. That master plan would consider, these are not commitments to do, but commitments to evaluate, a hydroponics and aquaponics commercial enterprise, integrated into and supportive of Gleaners' mission, providing food year-round, not subject to seasonal production. Innovative food bulk packaging, shelf-stable, frozen, refrigerated. USDA clean rooms to capture dairy and protein that's going to landfill right now. A redesigned process to find and integrate full and partial truckloads of perishable product now going to landfill. State-of-the-art integrated technology, data collection, analysis, used by Gleaners and hundreds of downstream partners. We're being careful to synchronize that with Feeding America that has multiple projects going on. In fact, Gleaners is the test site for 2 technology projects for Feeding America now. And that unique workforce program I referred to really think about careers in supply chain, whether they're nonprofit or for-profit. Frankly, there's a lot to learn from the Goodwill model that creates first opportunities and better opportunities. So how might we apply that? Because remember, the best hunger relief solution is a paycheck that feeds the whole family for the whole month. So if we can be an employer and create opportunities, we're actually solving hunger. Possible prepared meal preparation in bulk, leveraging our supply chain, but not necessarily replicating what other nonprofits are doing well, creating an additional opportunity for our partners. An innovative food market of the future, blending retail on a fluctuating price scale and our Gleaners' new curbside, Gleaners to go service. And in my, one of my favorites, I have to admit, we're envisioning a neighborhood cafe, which is already proven in Columbus, Ohio. If the Buckeyes can do it, Hoosiers can do it better, right? But think about that being not just a cafe to feed people who are hungry. That single mom who took her kids through the food pantry can now go over and have lunch free on us. But maybe the board members there, somebody's bringing volunteers, a gathering place for a neighborhood that needs it. Significant temperature-controlled storage, even envisioning for the outdoors, raised bed, fruit trees. Let's have our visitors who are hungry go pick some fruit right on the spot in the season. Everything we need to know about that and more, our friends at Corteva have proven and hopefully will teach us. Environmentally friendly zero waste policies, drawing on expertise from friends like Kroger and Walmart who've proven that on a commercial scale. Cost neutral or revenue generating alternative energy on site. Actually, discussions are already underway for Gleaners to host a first in the US location for a new technology out of the UK, a compost digester that would take food waste and turn it into energy to help power our campus. And every dollar we can save on the light bill, so to speak, is 6 meals for the neighbors. So doing the right thing sustainably, but also managing expenses. We're looking into solar array in partnership with Purdue Environmental Engineering School. Robust recycling and a campus wellness education program building on what we've already done, but extending it beyond employees to volunteers and our food insecure neighbors. So I'm going to give a little bit of quick context so we can set up the panel with this. The Emergency Food Assistance Program, the USDA's program, increased dramatically from 2018 to 20, but then it dropped by 50% in 2021. Precipitous drop off in food, even with the $1 billion in funding that we all heard about. Even with a 60% increase in Feeding America network meal distribution nationally, the meal gap between June 20 and June 21 was more than 10 billion pounds. In Indiana, that meant a 40% drop in supply to meet a 60% increase in need. Bad math, right? Our former board chair, Lorinda's here. Do you like that math? No? Yes. So that 60% increase in need is 747 million meals missed in Indiana in a year. Not acceptable. With Gleaners' additional role as a regional distribution hub, we're very focused on nutritious produce, protein, and dairy. That's why a recently completed McKinsey study for Feeding America shows food insecure Hoosiers need 90 million pounds of produce a year, but receive 35 million. 39% of need. For protein or meat, the need's 27 million, they receive 16. So we're doing a little better, 60% of need met on protein. Dairy, the need is 46 million. Our neighbors receive 8 million. They're getting 17% of what they need in dairy. We have to fix this on the perishable nutritious side. Even before the pandemic, Gleaners investments we made in 2017 to double the fundraising staff and really invest in our people, it was working. And then along came a pandemic to distract us a bit. But after the 2008 economic downturn, we depleted 6.6 million of 6.5 million, or 92% of our financial reserves wiped out, responding to that. For the last 5 years, we've been singularly focused on improving our financial strength, and we will never again find ourselves on the financial brink. We've handled this crisis far better from a long-term research perspective. So this year, Gleaners may reach 200 million in total revenue, and it's not enough to close the meal gap. I want you to think about the scale as you hear from our panelists. We're continuing to invest in our fleet, our facility, our technology, but the time has come to fully and effectively invest in our downstream partners. We're at the point now where it doesn't matter how much more food Gleaners finds. We don't have enough places to send it who have refrigeration and freezers and space. There's a massive bottleneck at that point past Gleaners. And that's not their fault. So we spent 15 months cataloging the need. We found already 8 to 10 million in need in our downstream partners and growing. Gleaners has already identified 4 million that we're deploying, and we're helping pantries and soup kitchens and others solve those bottlenecks, remove those barriers to offering the full range of nutritious food. But we're still coping with the most disrupted food supply chain in 75 years. We're determined to completely transform how we distribute food in response. We distributed 20 million meals 5 years ago. We quintupled that in 5 years to 103 million meals in the first 12 months of the pandemic. And we're going to sustain that higher level at least for the next year or two. 20 million to more than 100 million meals in 5 years. I think that's part of the reason I have an exhausted team at Gleaners. But they're all here bright and early this morning. In fact, the other way to think about that, Gleaners has distributed more meals in the last 2 years than our first 25 years of operation. And we're not done. There's still a gap. We're building unique neighbor-centric strategies for every county and neighborhood by neighborhood in Marion County. Redesigning the mix of distribution methods. Before the pandemic, our on-site pantry had one way we were feeding you. Now there are 4 options for the neighbors. So we're learning. We're accelerating the deployment of technology. Decision-making dashboards, the equal of the best-in-class corporate decisions. So we're behaving like that hybrid of supply chain company and compassionate nonprofit. So let me close, first by reminding you it's a privilege to serve our neighbors in need. And that Gleaners is a solid investment with measurable, impactful returns on your investments in us. We strive to be a supportive partner, and I believe that works because collaboration works uniquely well in this Hoosier state. As you can tell, there's a great deal happening under our compelling and overarching goal of closing the meal gap, feeding every neighbor the healthiest, most nutritious meal we can at the lowest per meal cost, but with unprecedented nimbleness and innovation applied to every aspect of the organization. We've proven that the Gleaners team can overcome daunting barriers, achieve phenomenal success, but we've also proven we need all of you to get the work done. So as you listen to the panel of experts, as you listen to Joe Slater, our COO and CFO, close at the end, please be thinking about how you want to be part of a shared future. And my vision of that future is we have no hungry neighbors. And hopefully some of the data I've shared with you, you agree with me that we can do this together. Thank you.
What if you had to make the choice between meals and medicine? Between making rent and filling lunch boxes? What if you didn't have enough money to keep the power on at home and nourish a healthy body? 37 million Americans, that's 1 in 9, are food insecure. This means they lack consistent access to enough nutritious food for an active, healthy life. Our neighbors who are food insecure cannot always stretch their household budgets to meet their basic needs. Even with the support of federal nutrition programs or help from family, friends, and community organizations, food insecurity can have serious long-term effects on a person's health. Healthy bodies and minds at every age require nutritious meals. When people don't have enough food, when they consistently need to choose inexpensive, low-quality calories, or experience chronic stress about where they will get their next meal, their health can suffer. People who experience food insecurity are at higher risk for diet-related diseases, such as type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, and obesity. More than half of households served by the Feeding America nationwide network of food banks have at least one member with high blood pressure. 1/3 have at least one member with diabetes. When an individual or family cannot afford enough nutritious food, they sometimes adopt coping strategies and trade-offs that work in the short term to avoid hunger. However, over time, these can increase the risk for diet-related disease and make it more challenging to manage. This reality can lead to a cycle of poor health. The cycle begins when an individual or family cannot afford enough nutritious food. The combination of financial stress and inadequate nutrition can result in poor disease management. The time and money needed to respond to these worsening health crises further drains the household budget, leaving little money for essential nutrition and medical care. This causes the cycle to continue. Food insecurity also negatively impacts the lives of future generations. In the United States today, more than 11 million children lack regular access to nutritious food. Children at risk of hunger are more likely to be in poor health and struggle in school. For some, it may have negative lifelong implications that could prevent a developing child from reaching their full potential. Together, we can make real change. We can break the cycle and build healthy, strong communities. Join the Feeding America nationwide network of food banks as we work to ensure all Americans have access to the nutritious foods we need to thrive. Take action, advocate, volunteer, donate. Visit hungerandhealth.org to learn how you can make a difference today. Together, we can end hunger.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be with you. It's always nice to be in a room face-to-face with real people who share a common cause. Now, as you may have guessed, if you've looked at your program, I am not Leslie Weidenbender, the editor of IBJ. I'm Greg Weaver, the managing editor at IBJ. And Leslie is off doing her civic duty today. She was unexpectedly seated on a jury this week. And that trial is continuing this morning. And so I'm very happy to be with you because this is also a cause that I feel strongly about. Gleaners Food Bank obviously does a lot for many people and many organizations around the area, including my church, which offers a food pantry on the south side at Faith United Church of Christ near Southport. So I'm familiar with the work a little bit from that perspective. John kind of set the tone for our discussion today, where we're going to be kind of talking about the entrepreneurial spirit and how entrepreneurship might help us all battle food scarcity and the food gap. And so I just want to start our discussion this morning by introducing our panelists. And I'll start with Marjorie Kraft beside me here. Marjorie is a senior advisor for corporate affairs at Elanco Animal Health, where she also serves as a liaison to the Elanco board. She previously served as executive director of the Elanco Foundation, which is committed to philanthropic investments, strategic partnerships, and volunteer engagements connected to food security and the human-animal bond. She remains on the Elanco Foundation board. And then next to her is Mitch Frazier. He's the president and CEO of AgriNovus Indiana, an initiative of the Central Indiana Community Partnership that focuses on growing the state's ag tech and ag bioscience economy. Before joining AgriNovus in June 2020, Mitch spent more than 4 years as the first non-family CEO of the regional John Deere dealership Reynolds Farm Equipment, where I bought my lawnmower, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate the business.
Yeah. And then Governor Eric Holcomb just named Mitch the chairman of the Indiana State Fair Commission.
Morning.
And then next to Mitch is Keith Veal, who informed me before we got started that he's brought like a whole entourage from Wabash College to support him. So we welcome you. Anyway, Keith refers to himself as a curious catalyst, and he is the CEO of Resite Development, a firm he founded in 2017 that focuses on the acquisition and redevelopment of distressed properties. Resite grew out of another of Keith's companies, Sustainable Solutions, an environmental consulting company that focuses on risk management in redeveloping brownfield sites. So, as I mentioned, John Elliott kind of set the stage for our discussion this morning, and so we'll just jump right in and start with Keith. So, Keith, this is... You need that support from Wabash?
Not yet.
Oh, okay.
Not yet.
Not yet, okay. So, Keith, this is not an area that you typically work in, and so I'm just curious, you call yourself a curious catalyst, and kind of what does that mean as you think about helping organizations like Gleaners try to solve complex social problems?
Thank you for that question. Before I answer, I would like to thank Gleaners and all of you for this opportunity. Honored to be on the stage with the mites of the likes of these mighty thinkers in the space. Obviously, I am outside of the space, but I'm also, what I contribute to the space is a level of critical thinking that I think really helps Gleaners and organizations like Gleaners think differently about its mission. Excuse me. Einstein once said, if I had 1 hour to solve a problem and my life depended on the solution, I would spend the first 55 minutes asking questions, because those questions help to understand the fundamentals of the problem. And then I can solve the problem in 5 minutes or less. Now, not saying that in this case, right? But what I am saying is, from an entrepreneurial perspective, and the curious catalyst has everything to do with my approach to what I do, to problem solving, right? I mean, that is the space that entrepreneurs exist in first and foremost. We are problem solvers. And part of the beauty in the challenge is getting to a solution as quickly and as efficiently as possible. We say we fail fast and fail forward if we fail at all, right? So in this context, and what brought me to Gleaners, what brought us together is, as a developer of environmentally distressed properties, I like to say I sort of separate myself from the rest of the development world, the rest of the real estate development world, in that I don't develop products. I don't have, when I look over my shoulder, I don't have an affordable housing, market rate, commercial or industrial product for this property. I develop solutions. And the way that I develop those solutions is much the same way that Gleaners implements its mission. And those of you who exist in the food space, how you implement your mission, right? It is at the neighborhood level. It is understanding first those challenges that prevent folks from having a level of access. And so what I do in my work is figure out the problems that are challenges to access, and how we can take a solution to a problem set that initially just looks like a piece of property. But ultimately what it is an amalgam of ideas from folks on the neighborhood level who live, work, play, worship in an area, in a neighborhood. And we apply that, we try to apply that as a sort of a market solution to address problem sets. And so the curious catalyst is that guy that is always thinking critically, acting responsibly, living humane. Yeah. So about the challenges, but also being able to really focus on movement, right? Focus on the efficiency of the solution, getting there as quickly as possible, because in some cases, as Einstein alluded, lives depend on it.
So, and Keith, I can see the wheels have already been turning on this. Do you already have some sites in mind for?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed, indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
So, Margie, we'll turn to you now. You have been helping lead the Food Secure Indy Coalition of organizations that tackle hunger, and you're trying to close the meal gap and make Indianapolis the most food secure city in the nation, right?
Right.
Yeah. So can you kind of fill us in on how that's going, kind of where you are and what's next?
Yeah, so this has been my passion place for the last year when we launched Food Secure Indy, which really came out of for a reminder for those that may not know about the initiative, really came out of the need of COVID, where there was this sense of we need to do something. And Elanco being in the food space, right? Our mission and vision is food and companionship, enriching life. We're responsible for that upstream part of the protein that John was talking about, and nutritious meals. And we said, how can we really stimulate and do something more meaningful and impactful? And so it was bringing all of the groups that you've heard about today, the community, your government, nonprofits, corporates, all together. And as my coworker said this morning, being that conductor of the train so that we don't split tracks unnecessarily. And it's not that the work that we intended to do hadn't been done, but doing it in a way that invites all of you to be a part of it. It's the Keiths and the Mitches of the world to join in the work. And so there were 3 things we set out to do. One was to have the most efficient path to resources, and that's both people to resources, but the resources to the people. How do we make that the most efficient? And so when John talks about the distribution charge in front of us and logistics, that's a part of that. Second one is just to make sure that we have enough nutritious meals to meet the need. There's always, I would love to say that we can solve hunger, and hunger just goes away. But daily experiences that people have, it impacts their availability, the ability to get food. So we know that every time and place, there was going to be someone in need. But if there is a need, there's a solution there for them. There's food there for them. And it's the good, nutritious food, because we know the power of brain development in children, et cetera. So the power of that. So that was the second thing. And the third thing is to create a lasting, sustainable, something in perpetuity, right, of this connection between all of these entities, the community, nonprofits, for-profits, government, that is sustainable, whether I'm a part of a project or any of us are a part of the project, but there's something established that continues regardless of who the players are. So that was the mission that we started out with, and it's bold to say in 5 years we want to be America's first food secure city, but the amount of assets, and by assets I mean energy and efforts already taking place in the city is remarkable in this space. We should all, as Hoosiers, which I sound funny probably to most of y'all. I am a Hoosier by choice. I realize now, even the way I say Hoosier, I'm a Hoosier by choice. I need to be a part of the Visit Indy video thing. I'm from South Carolina, and I've been here for 9 years, and it has really been home for me, and it's been a delight to be here. But and part of that pride of now being a Hoosier by choice is the effort and energy that our community has put towards food security. And so we, the 3 things that we have done to conclude and say, these are what we want to focus the 3 areas on when it comes to that sustained mechanism to ensure that these groups work together. The first working group is the making all our communications robust, visible, and actionable. And what I mean by that is if you're interested in getting involved in food security, do you know where to start? Gleaners is a great place to start, but there are a lot of other partners that also do this work, and maybe there's some other interest that you have. So what is that network map that you can go into and plug into and know where the greatest need is to participate? But that is sustained. So that's one of the work streams that we're going to be deep diving into. And again, these are all things that are currently happening. It's just this is where we need to make our investments to ensure that they are expanded at a way that we can maintain. The second one is around this logistics piece and how, as Keith was saying, our solutions today are very hyper-local. And whether that's around food security or just you're a shopper, they want to make you feel like we know you. And we need to know the communities, and the communities need to know who we're involved in. And that means having things hyper-local. And so the logistics hub, where we're thinking about what can we do, not just in having the supply present, but that there's a sidewalk that the mom can walk down to go and get food instead of having her kids walk down Washington Street. With no sidewalks. So we think about not just where it's placed, but the path there, right? Making that simple. So that's the one thing around accessing the resources. And then the last piece is around the journey, right? So when we think about what is it that people experience related to SNAP benefits, which account for over 50% of the sourced food, it comes from SNAP. And that's a very big, important part. And we realize if we can impact that journey, what are those little speed bumps that get in the way that we can address? What can we do to improve that? Because we think that's going to make the biggest difference. So those goals that we set, those are the 3 things that after a year of workshops and 60 plus people from the community and all those sectors that I've explained, we've come together to say that's where we want to focus. And that work is happening. We're just going to take what's happening and say yes to great, right? Say no to good and yes to great. It's that whole essential wins, that elenco that we live and die by. So that's what we're trying to do here. And it's been really amazing. It's been 1 year in, so yeah.
Yeah. So how do we bring that entrepreneurial spirit to it that John Elliott was talking about, and why do you think that's important?
Well, Keith, I think, is an awesome example of it. So I brought my cheat sheet up here because there's a quote that I told him, I warned him before I came up here. I was like, I've got a quote for you. The book, uh-oh, my mic went off. Did I turn it off? Hello?
Gotta love live TV.
That's right.
I know. I don't know what to do. Hey, people. Hello?
Can anybody hear me? No?
Oh, we all went.
We almost all have gone dead.
Gotta love live TV.
They don't want your quote. Did Wabash do it?
Yeah. You guys are responsible for that.
So, well, do you want to
I guess
go
I'll
ahead
talk
and
loud.
talk as loudly
I'll
as
talk
you can?
loud. I can do that. So the book called Range by David Epstein, it's Why Generalists Thrive in a Specialized World, because I was struggling with being a generalist and I wanted to feel better about that. And there was a quote in there about the power of not being a subject matter expert, and I call it getting the unusual suspects to the table. And the quote is, deep analogical thinking is the practice of recognizing conceptual similarities in multiple domains or scenarios that may seem to have a little in common on the surface. It's a powerful tool for solving wicked problems. And as John laid out, this is a wicked problem, and it's not wicked and unsolvable. It's wicked in that it's big and it's deep, and it takes the outsiders or the unusual suspects in this space to come in and look at it differently. Because if you get too deep into the forest, right, that whole tree and forest idea, you can overthink it and overwork it. And sometimes we get in our own way when we overwork it. And so the energy and what entrepreneurship is addresses this very thing. It's taking the experiences that you have that you may not think have anything to do with food security. I'm not a food security expert. I'm super passionate about feeding people, but I don't know all the ins and outs. But that's the power in what I bring to this, is that I can look at it from a more, just a different perspective. So that's really, to me, that's the power of entrepreneurship, and that's the power of what everyone in this room, whether you're a banker or you're in retail, or it doesn't matter, right? You are an IT expert, which maybe they'll show up and we'll get some microphones working. We could, sorry IT, but we could use you IT. So there's all types of ways that you can contribute to the space, even if you are not what you think this is the place for you to play. It is.
So,
and it requires it, because it's a wicked problem. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I know that Keith and I both have experience in show choir. Some experience in theater, so we can project if we have to, right? So we'll do our best here to move along. Mitch, the next question is for you. I was hoping you could explain a little bit about your organization, AgriNovus, kind of what it does, and how you think it can play a role with Gleaners, and also bring that entrepreneurial spirit.
Absolutely. Yeah, Greg, thanks for the question. Thanks for everybody for investing time this morning to come together to really tackle a problem that, as sons, daughters, moms, dads, grandpas, grandmas, whoever you are, whatever demographic you represent, this affects us all. And I'll tell you, as AgriNovus Indiana, this is not an area that we historically have spent time in. I joined the organization about 16 months ago. And we are an organization focused entirely on growing the ag bioscience economy here in Indiana by $4 billion by 2024. That's our big goal. But we did some work in January with Ernst & Young and Purdue University. There's a research report that really said what broke in the food supply chain in Indiana. It's a $29 billion industry. Value-added food and nutrition, a $29 billion industry here in Indiana. So we said, hey, what happened during COVID and what can we learn from it? Well, in that research report, there was a passage, and this was not the focus of the research report, but it was so powerful because we all experienced what lack of grocery store stocking was amidst the pandemic. First time in my 42 years on this planet, I went to the grocery store during COVID, and there weren't things on the shelves. And so in this research report, one of the researchers identified that in the future, food deserts may not be defined by proximity to a retail grocer, but more by connectivity, more by technology, connecting supply and demand. And if you think about the way that we all interacted with food, many of us interacted with food during the pandemic, we went to Kroger and Kroger put the groceries in our trunk. Or we used Shipt and Shipt brought the groceries to our house. Yet we look at the SNAP program today. Margie mentioned SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition and Assistance Program. Many of you know that as food stamps, and Adrena from the Family Social Services Administration is here with us this morning. Just an incredible leader. Indiana is a better place. Kids and families are better because of Adrena and her work and her team's work. But you look at how we tackle SNAP today. We're tackling it in many cases through innovative ways, really trying hard to connect supply and demand, getting high quality calories to people in need. But what can we learn? What can we be inspired by what's happening, how we consumed goods, how we got groceries amidst the pandemic, and how do we apply that to really focus on efficiency of SNAP? So we started a program called Hunger Tech, and the idea is very simple. How do we look at what's happening in the macro economy, and how do we look at the SNAP program, and how do we bring those two things together to say, how can we connect supply and demand? How do we get high quality calories to people in need and do it in a way that leverages modern technology? You look at really interesting young companies like Joker, J-O-K-R, if anybody's on your phone, want to take a look, it's amazing. Or GoPuff, a really interesting tech company on the East Coast doing some really interesting work. I mean, these companies are delivering direct to the door, in some cases for free, in some cases for a very low rate. When we look at SNAP specifically, if you're a SNAP beneficiary, you can buy groceries online. It's authorized in the 2014 Farm Bill. Indiana adopted that technology earlier, adopted that availability earlier in 2020, but you can't pay for delivery. Imagine if you're food insecure and you can order groceries, but you can't get them. In the world that we live in, how is that even possible? And so our objective is this. Our objective at AgriNovus Indiana is to be the convener, to be the ones who really define the problem. And Adrena and her team working closely with them to say, let's really understand from the ground truth. I love the idea of asking questions. I mean, Keith, I love it. So how do we go to recipients? How do we go to those who really are struggling and are food insecure, that are receiving SNAP benefits? How do we understand from them what the real need is? Is it they don't have delivery? I mean, that's what we think it might be. But we need to ask questions. We need to really understand. We need to go to those administrators who are administering this program. Where do the challenges exist? What barriers exist to make that possible? And lastly, we need to go to the food supply chain, to the work that Margie and her team have done at Elanco and all across the state and all across our $29 billion food industry. What's the problem, right? How do we isolate the problem, define the problem we're going to solve, and then bring people together to go solve it? While it is a really challenging problem, and we are blessed in this state to have Gleaners, and John, the work that you and your team are doing and continue to do is nothing short of extraordinary. But how do we think about this as a network? How do we think of this as a fabric of support, a fabric of connectivity? Tech is going to be a piece of it, and my belief is Indiana is going to be the place where that tech is created, and we're going to be a part of the solution, not just here in Indiana, but all across the country.
So, well, I too like the whole idea of asking questions. You know, as a journalist, that's kind of what I like to do. But asking those questions can be very important, obviously, in understanding the problem. So, Margie, I wanted to turn to you next. I mean, you have spoken about harnessing the power of unusual suspects in the fight against hunger. And I'm wondering if you could tell us kind of what you mean by that, and who are those people?
Yeah, this room, this panel. I think if you saw the list come out and you're like, okay, they're the panelists on food security. Our titles may not indicate that. So we all are. And I would say to what Mitch was just sharing is that inquisitive mindset is what the unusual suspects bring to the table. And for those working in this space to understand that that's not a challenge to your work. We don't ask questions to say, gotcha.
Yes.
We ask questions to try to isolate what's really happening. And that, I think, is the most important part, because one of the challenges in this space, universally, it doesn't matter, it's just building that trust, right, between the communities and those who are trying to support the community, between each other, the organizations that we've said are all a part of this. And a part of building that trust is understanding that we are not here to say gotcha. The unusual suspects who want to show up because we're passionate about this space and have really very different experiences, it's to really isolate and understand. But that takes us a level of trust to understand that that's where we're coming from. So I think you're looking at the unusual suspects. So I think Keith was like, really, you want me up here? We're like, yes, we do.
Well, I mean, Keith, speaking of that, I mean, what does it mean to you when Marjorie talks about unusual suspects? And how do you think, Gleaners and other organizations can use them?
Well, she nailed the intro. So if I were a betting man, I would bet that most folks who saw the flyer announcing this event and saw the panelists said, you know what? I can understand these two, but this one right here, this outlier right here, and then I'd take that a step further and say that probably 40%, I'm going to be kind to myself and say intrigued, 40% totally confused, and then 20% said, you know what? I think I can see it. So I am, as Margie said, in part the unusual suspect, but I think there are additional unusual suspects that often go completely out of sight, out of mind. And those are the folks, oh wow. The folks who actually need the services that we're providing, right? I like to think that the farther away you get from the problem, put better, the farther, when it comes to food access, comes to hunger, right? The farther away you get from the mouth of those in need, the more complicated the problem tends to be. So I have completely thought about, as an unusual suspect, right? Reverse engineering this thing and asking the question, right? So to me, a successful business model is scalable and replicable. So how do we take, Mitch, you mentioned this, right? You've got this network in which these businesses exist. But what's not included in this network are the folks who directly need the energy that we are giving to this problem. So, cut to the chase. The unusual suspects are those folks in the community at the neighborhood level, at the address level, even, who can be active participants in solving their own challenges. Imagine, if you will, if I had 100 hungry individuals in a neighborhood, if I can create an entrepreneur, if I can tap the entrepreneurial spirit of just one, I've moved the needle.
Yes.
So to me, it is about doing what's necessary to recognize those folks as the unusual suspects and thinking critically, acting responsibly when it comes to moving the needle. And moving the needle really is about access, giving those folks the kind of access that some of us have the privilege of enjoying to impact our lives in a positive way. So imagine how different the mission work will be when we reverse engineer how we think about the problem. We reverse engineer how we implement the solution and begin to implement solutions on the neighborhood level so that it is as close to the folks that we're doing this work for, right? But then I gotta say this, we're doing this for them. They now become a part of the network. That's right. We're doing this work together. Right? So if we can inspire to empower, empowerment in and of itself is inspirational. And so I say, unusual suspects, let's empower them. Let's identify the single mom, the single dad, the entrepreneurial family, the veteran. Tap that entrepreneurial spirit in them and say, let's solve this together. Because if we can create one entrepreneur in a neighborhood that has 100 hungry, now we got 99. And I believe that one entrepreneur in that neighborhood can help reduce that number even further.
That's the power of the community part of this. You have to have it. One of the North Stars in the FSI work, the Food Secure Indy work, is, I think it's a quote. I'm stealing it if it is, but it's the nothing about me without me. And I think a lot of, historically, we've just given a solution without thoroughly knowing if that was the problem and just said, accept this. And I think that has fed some of the distrust that we've had. Now, we've come a long way, particularly with the work that Gleaners and others have done in building that community, but that's exactly what you've just said speaks to. So,
I think that proximity is so important. Investing the time, as a guy who has not experienced food insecurity, I have an idea of what it could be, but at the challenge of, or making the assumption of what it could be, we need to go spend time. Proximity leads to massive opportunity to really understand the problem. Not just the problem that is surfaced, but what's below it, what's beneath the waterline. And then once we have that, then we can clearly define the problem and reverse engineer and say, okay, we know, and Margie, you and your team with the Landco support, the governor's support, the mayor's support have done amazing work with Food Secure Indy. We want to be the most food secure city in America. Awesome. If we go all the way and say, okay, for those who are food insecure, what's causation? What's root cause, as John identified? What are the things that are below this? Then we can apply innovation, we can apply technology, we can apply education. But you can't do all of that at once, right? We've set a big goal. Now we need to go spend time, really understand what that is, knowing that the system that operates this today is already in flight, right? John is still going to be wildly busy in his team. Adrena is going to be wildly busy in her team. And so they have to continue to keep things moving. It's up to the rest of us to say, we've got to come together and help. They're fighting the fire every day. They're doing everything they can and then some. It's up to the rest of us to say, how do we link arms? How do we come alongside them? How do we really identify the problem with proximity and then go make a difference?
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question. I want to address this to each of you. I'm curious about how the pandemic is continuing to affect the efforts to fight hunger and what can we do to address those issues. As we sit here today, still kind of in the middle of it all.
So I'm going to take a positive spin as one who does not mind living in ambiguity, and change is inevitable, particularly at Elanco. It's changing every day, which is fun. is the environment that COVID has created is one of change. We've all been touched by it, it doesn't matter on what level, we've all been touched. And so the appetite for change and the environment for change is here. And it's our opportunity to seize it. So there's a lot to that question around food security and what the pandemic has done in terms of numbers and that kind of thing. But I see it as, let's seize this moment of uncomfortableness, because that's when you grow. But that change is generally, if you think past, it's incremental and slow and painful. The pain is still there because it's change, but it's not incremental anymore. We have an opportunity to leapfrog, to really seize the opportunity here from all of these usual and unusual suspects, having the community's voices being heard like never before. I mean, I'm listening differently now. I hope y'all are, because that's what COVID has brought. And so that's really, I think, the opportunity that we have. And I'm an optimist. My glass is always half full. So I'm taking the positive spin on that question.
Yeah,
I'll toss it to you.
Yeah, Greg, I think, I go back to that day, it's probably in April or May, and we all had the same experience at some point during the pandemic. We walked into a grocery store, and there weren't things on the shelf. And as time goes on, I think the biggest challenge we have is you can lose sight of it. You can lose sight of, we felt that for maybe a brief moment. There are people who wake up every day blocks from here, blocks from each of our homes, who realize that and experience that every day. We live in a country that is so wildly successful despite all the challenges that exist. This has got to be a place where we solve it. I mean, this isn't just a good thing to do or a nice thing to do. This has got to be something that we all rally around and say, look, not here. Not here. This is not going to be a place where we continue to let this happen, we continue to drive by it, and we continue to say, well, that's probably somebody else's problem. That's my belief, is as this pandemic goes on, we can't lose sight of the challenge that exists, and we can't lose this wind in our sail that we all know that needs to continue to blow with gale force winds to keep us focused on a solution. And that solution has to be driven by those who experience it each and every day.
Mm-hmm. So, Keith, in your work, as you're trying to redevelop properties and help organizations with special needs like Gleaners, how does the pandemic affect your work?
So, in two ways, it's affected my exposure to sort of the breadth and depth of the problem and its impact. I can easily, and I'm sure those of us on this panel and even those in the audience can absorb, right, some of the impact that the pandemic had and has had, right? But to your point, Mitch, there are others of us who have not been so fortunate. Right. And so for me, it's recognizing the depth, the breadth and depth of the impact and how it's been disproportionate across our community. But I think that, hunger, the pandemic also kind of gave us a much deeper sense of what hunger is, the challenge of hunger, not just in Indiana, but across the country. It's a peculiar thing in a country as wealthy as this one, as wealthy as the one we live in, to struggle with hunger.
Yes.
I see the problem really as a matter of wealth distribution. Since we're not in the business of redistributing wealth, my solution, not to everything, but to this one, let's create entrepreneurs.
That's exactly right.
Let's create entrepreneurs. When John talks about the AgriHub, my vision of the AgriHub is that place where it's franchisor, franchisee. The agri-hub is the franchisor. The franchisee would be, imagine, aquaponics, hydroponics facilities in all of the neighborhoods that struggle with food access. You equip those neighborhood entrepreneurs with access to those things that there are no absolutes, but there's certainly things out there that entrepreneurs enjoy, right? That help to not necessarily ensure success or guarantee success, but contribute, right? Mitigate risk on the pathway to success. And so for me, it is thinking, again, much differently about the impact of the pandemic, not just on me and what I do, but how I do it, what I've seen. And it gave me an opportunity to really, really reflect on how I do my business differently with more intentionality.
Keith, I think there's something, and I missed it, and so we've talked about it, but I think it's important to talk about here. You identified economics, right? Entrepreneurship, but economics as part of the solution. This isn't just, let's write a check, that's good, right, or let's make sure that we get food to the people who need it. Let's create entrepreneurship, let's create companies, let's create economics to make sure that this is not just a one-time fix, right, but it's enduring. And absolutely. I think that is so critically important.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So, well, I thank you all for your input on that and for inspiring us to think about how to address food scarcity through entrepreneurship. And I think we should all give our panelists a round of applause for being with us today. Thank you again, and now I'd like to conclude our discussion by introducing Joe Slater, who is Gleaners' COO and CFO, and a critical reason why Gleaners has such financial strength. And I should also point out that Joe has also been honored as an Ibj CFO of the Year. Joe, would you come up and close us out?
Thank you. A little bit of a daunting task to try to wrap this up. A big part of me just wants to say what they said. Right? So in that spirit, there will be a recording of today's program. I know we had some sound challenges earlier. I've been told that it comes through loud and clear on the recording. So anyone that registered today, there will be an email sent to you that has a link to that recording. So I would certainly encourage you. I know I will probably rewind, press play several times. Great content. So I want to say thanks to Greg and Nate and the IBJ team for pulling us all together. Thank you to every one of you on the panel for your insight, for your ideas, for your inspiration. Thanks to all of you for attending, taking some time out of your day. Thank you for your interest in investing with us to build a hunger-free community. So as you walk away from here, right, you probably get the sense that we are going to shake things up a little bit in a good way, in a very necessary way. So as you leave here, I encourage you all to take something with you. That may be something that simply informs you a little more on what needs to be done to shape this better future for our community. My hope is that you leave here, though, not simply more informed, but also inspired. Inspired to invest in our community. Inspired to invest in the untapped potential of all those that live in the struggle of poverty and food insecurity. There are so many powerful things that were said up here today. I love the way Margie framed it, that we need to convene the unusual suspects. Those of you who sit outside of the social service or nonprofit or poverty relief or healthcare space, what ideas do you have? How can you invest? We've already started to see some of this. Honestly, the fact that Margie and Mitch and Keith are the panelists today is great evidence of unusual suspects starting to get involved. Some that you don't see here today, and John mentioned some of this, but just to highlight, as an example, a large for-profit energy company, Capstone Green Energy, out of California, is working with us to capture that food waste and turn it into a positive economic stream. Also not here today, Carano, a local high-growth tech company who's working with us to connect better with the hungry neighbors in our community. We have an initiative called Voice of the Neighbor, and we haven't always historically done a good job, even as Keith mentioned, of listening to their voices and engaging them in the solutions. So with the power of technology and other players, we can now communicate through short message texting with them and gather information and ideas on how to better serve them. Keith called himself a curious catalyst. So my question again to you is, how has your curiosity been ignited today? What ideas do you have to innovate with us? Again, John gave plenty of ideas that are on our plate in his introduction. What sparks you? What do you want to learn more about? Reach out to us. We don't want this to be an ending point. We want this to ignite a dialogue. I also encourage you to move past a mindset that sees poverty and hunger as a charitable matter, as simply a charitable problem with a charitable solution, and start to look at it as an opportunity to invest. An opportunity to invest in the community we live in, an opportunity to invest in creating new opportunities for those who have not had them before, an opportunity to invest in a tremendous source of human capital. We need to build new social and economic models that start to solve some of these generations-old issues. So I hope this informs you. I hope it inspires you. I hope it encourages you to invest in our shared community, the place where we all live and work in. And finally, I want to thank our Gleaners team. There's several of you here today. John, we're not tired, we're inspired. We're going to keep going with what we're doing. John, I want to thank you. John's a guy that stands up a lot and thanks a lot of other people for their involvement, and as the leader, he doesn't hear that often enough in my mind. So thank you for your inspiration, for your ideas, for being a catalyst of pulling this kind of thing together today. So again, thank you all for your time and attention today. Take care, be safe, and God bless.